Dr. Sarah Chen had seen many desperate faces during her 15 years as a field medic, but the amber eyes staring at her now held a pain that transcended species barriers. The massive Catharan pack leader, Vextar, stood nearly 8 feet tall with silver-streaked fur and battle scars marking his muscular frame. His powerful hands, each equipped with retractable claws, trembled as he spoke in broken standard. "Human doctor," Vextar's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "My cubs. They fade like morning mist. Our healers know nothing. The sickness spreads." Sarah adjusted her medical scanner and looked past the towering alien toward the makeshift camp. The Kitharan refugees had been fleeing the Dominion War for months, their once proud fleet reduced to damaged transport ships and overcrowded shelters. The smell of fear and desperation hung thick in the recycled air of the humanitarian station. "How many are affected?" Sarah asked, her training overriding the exhaustion that had settled into her bones after 3 weeks of treating war refugees from a dozen different species. 17 cubs in my pack alone, maybe 40 across all families. Vextar's ears flattened against his skull. They burn with fever, refuse food, cannot keep water. "The smallest ones," his voice cracked. "The smallest ones have already begun the final sleep." Sarah's stomach clenched. She had heard about Kitharan death customs during her xenobiology courses. When their young were dying, they entered a comatose state called the final sleep, during which the pack would sing them to the afterlife. It was considered both an honor and a tragedy. "Take me to them," she said, grabbing her emergency medical kit. The refugee medical bay had been hastily converted from a cargo hold. Makeshift beds lined the walls, and the air hummed with the sounds of various alien medical equipment. Sarah followed Vextar through the maze of patients until they reached a sectioned area, where small forms lay motionless under thermal blankets. The Kitharan cubs were beautiful creatures, their fur ranging from deep gold to pure white, with large expressive eyes and small pointed ears. But now they lay still as death, their breathing shallow and rapid. Sarah knelt beside the nearest cub, a small female with golden fur, and carefully extended her scanner. "Her name is Zira," Vextar whispered. "My youngest daughter." The scanner's readings made Sarah's blood run cold. Massive inflammation throughout the nervous system, dangerously high fever, severe dehydration, and something else, an unknown pathogen that her equipment couldn't identify. The other Kitharan healers, tall, graceful beings with intricate knowledge of their own physiology, watched her with a mixture of hope and skepticism. "We have tried everything," said elder healer Mixandra, her melodic voice heavy with grief. "Our traditional remedies, modern medicine from the core worlds, even experimental treatments from the research stations. Nothing stops this plague." Sarah ran additional scans on 3 more cubs, finding identical symptoms. The pathogen seemed to target young Kitharans specifically, attacking their developing nervous systems with ruthless efficiency. It was unlike anything in her medical database. "Has this affected any other species?" she asked. "Only our young," Vextar replied. "Adults show no symptoms. Other species on the ships remain healthy." That gave Sarah a crucial clue. Species-specific pathogens often had unique vulnerabilities, but they also required specialized knowledge to combat. She pulled up her portable laboratory interface and began running comparative analyses between human and Kitharan biology. "I need to ask something that might sound strange," Sarah said, looking up at the gathered Kitharans. "Have your people ever been exposed to Earth diseases? Any historical contact?" The healers exchanged glances before Mixandra spoke. "Centuries ago, yes. When our species first met humans, there was a plague. Many died, but our ancestors developed immunity. Why do you ask?" Sarah's mind raced. Evolutionary pressure, cross-species immunity, genetic memory. Pieces of a puzzle began falling into place. This pathogen might be related to something from that historical contact. Your adult immune systems remember how to fight it, but the cubs haven't developed that immunity yet. She pulled up her personal medical files and cross-referenced historical plague data. There it was, a respiratory virus that had jumped between species during first contact, devastating both human and Kitharan populations before burning itself out. The survivors had passed on genetic resistance to their descendants. "I have an idea," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. "But it's going to require trust. I need to synthesize antibodies from adult Kitharan blood and combine them with human immunoglobulin treatments. It's never been tried before." Vextar's ears perked forward. "If there is even the smallest chance." "The risk is significant," Sarah continued honestly. Cross-species medicine is dangerous. I could make things worse. But given the progression rate, these cubs don't have much time left. The pack leader looked down at his unconscious daughter, then back at Sarah. In his amber eyes, she saw the desperate love of a father willing to risk everything for his children. "What do you need?" he asked. "Blood samples from every healthy adult, access to your ship's medical fabrication unit, and 12 hours, Sarah replied. "And I'll need helpers who can follow precise instructions without question." Mixandra stepped forward. "You shall have whatever you require, human doctor. We place our cubs' lives in your hands." As Sarah began setting up her equipment, she felt the weight of an entire species' hope settling on her shoulders. Somewhere in the complex interaction between human and Kytheran biology lay the key to saving these children. She had built her career on pushing the boundaries of xenomedicine, but this would be her greatest challenge. The first step was understanding exactly how the pathogen worked. Sarah drew blood from little Zira and began running detailed analyses. Under the microscope, she could see the viral particles attacking nerve cells with surgical precision. The pathogen had evolved specifically to exploit gaps in juvenile Kytheran immunity. Around her, the adult Kytherans began volunteering blood samples. Vextar was first, rolling up his sleeve and extending a massive arm. Despite their fearsome appearance, the Kytherans were remarkably gentle people, their warrior culture balanced by deep familial bonds and protective instincts. "Your daughter is strong," Sarah told Vextar as she drew his blood. "I can see it in her cellular structure. If we can give her immune system the tools it needs, she'll fight this," the pack leader nodded, hope flickering in his eyes like a distant star. Sarah worked through the night, her hands steady despite the enormity of the task before her. The medical fabrication unit hummed quietly in the corner of the converted laboratory as Sarah worked through her third hour of blood analysis. Each sample told the same story. Adult Kytherans possessed sophisticated antibodies against the pathogen, but their cubs showed no trace of inherited immunity. The evolutionary gap was wider than she had initially suspected. "Dr. Chen," Mixandra's voice interrupted her concentration. "The youngest cub, Nexori from the Moonhunter pack, has entered deeper sleep. His breathing grows fainter." Sarah looked up from her microscope to see worry etched across the healer's elongated features. Through the transparent aluminum partition, she could see a tiny white-furred cub whose chest barely rose and fell. His pack parents stood vigil beside him, their heads bowed in what she recognized as the beginning of funeral songs. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked. "Perhaps 6 hours before we lose him. The others will follow within a day." Sarah's hands moved faster across her instruments. The preliminary antibody isolation was complete, but she needed to modify the proteins to work with juvenile Kytheran physiology. She pulled up her xenobiology databases and began cross-referencing cellular receptor maps. "Mixandra, I need you to explain something to me," Sarah said without looking up from her screen. "When Kytheran cubs are born, how long before their immune systems fully develop?" "Normally, 2 full seasons. But during stress or exile," the healer paused, "their development slows. These refugee cubs have been exposed to trauma for months. Their immune systems are delayed." That explained everything. The pathogen was targeting children whose natural defenses hadn't matured, exploiting the very stress that had driven them from their homeworld. It was a cruel irony. The war that had displaced them was making them vulnerable to a disease their ancestors had already conquered. Sarah began programming the fabrication unit with a complex sequence of molecular modifications. She would need to create hybrid antibodies that could function in juvenile physiology, while maintaining the targeting specificity of the adult immune response. It was like performing surgery at the molecular level. "What can we do to help?" Vextar's deep voice came from behind her. The pack leader had been watching her work for hours, his presence both protective and anxious. "Actually, there is something," Sarah said. "I need to understand more about cub development. In human children, stress hormones can suppress immune function. Do Kytherans have similar mechanisms?" Vextar nodded gravely. "When cubs are frightened or separated from pack, they become weak, sickly. It is why we never leave them alone during journeys." Sarah felt another piece click into place. "The cortisol analog. I've been seeing elevated levels in all the blood samples. The cubs aren't just fighting a virus. They're fighting the biochemical effects of prolonged fear and displacement." She modified her treatment protocol to include stress, hormone suppressors, and immune boosters. specifically calibrated for young Catharan biology. The fabrication unit would need another 4 hours to synthesize everything, but the comprehensive approach felt right. There's something else, Sarah continued. The treatment will work better if the cubs feel safe and loved during recovery. Catharan pack bonds aren't just social. They have measurable biochemical effects, right? Yes, Mixandra replied. Pack songs and touch sharing strengthen cubs' life force. But these children have been too weak to respond. Sarah's exhausted mind suddenly sparked with an idea. What if we combined the medical treatment with traditional pack healing? Your songs and touch might amplify the antibody's effectiveness. Both aliens looked skeptical. Human doctor, our ways and your science do not typically, Mixandra began. They don't have to be separate, Sarah interrupted. Psychoneuroimmunology, the connection between emotional state and immune function, is well documented across dozens of species. If pack bonding triggers healing hormones in cubs, we should use that alongside the antibodies. Vexitar's ears pricked forward with interest. You would combine human medicine with Catharan pack magic? Not magic, biology, Sarah corrected gently. But yes, that's exactly what I'm proposing. She pulled up holographic displays showing the complex biochemical cascades involved in Catharan emotional bonding. Sure enough, pack connection triggered releases of growth factors and immune enhancers that could significantly boost recovery rates. The first treatment dose will be ready in 4 hours, Sarah announced. But I want to start the pack healing now. Gather every healthy adult and adolescent Catharan on the station. We're going to create the largest pack circle these cubs have ever experienced. Word spread quickly through the refugee areas. Within an hour, nearly 200 Catharans had assembled in the medical bay. They formed concentric circles around the sick cubs, their voices joining in deep, resonant songs that seemed to vibrate through the deck plating. Sarah monitored the cubs' vital signs as the pack singing continued. Within minutes, stress hormones began dropping. Heart rate stabilized and brain activity increased. The tiny patients were responding to sounds and vibrations they had been evolutionarily programmed to recognize as safety and love. Remarkable, Mixandra whispered, watching her instruments. Their cellular activity is increasing. I have never seen such rapid improvement from pack songs alone. Little Zira's eyes fluttered open for the first time in days. Her fever was still dangerously high, but she turned toward her father's voice with unmistakable recognition. Vexitar's massive hand gently stroked her small head as he sang an ancient lullaby. The antibodies will be ready soon, Sarah told him. But what you're all doing, this is just as important as anything I can synthesize in a lab. The pack leader's amber eyes glistened with tears. You understand us, human doctor. You see that cubs need more than medicine to live. Sarah nodded, feeling a profound connection to these alien refugees who loved their children with the same fierce devotion she had seen in human parents. Medicine was her science, but healing required understanding the whole being, body, mind, and spirit. As the fabrication unit signaled completion of the first treatment batch, Sarah felt a mixture of hope and terror. The next few hours would determine whether her unprecedented combination of cutting-edge medicine and ancient wisdom could save 17 young lives. She prepared the first injection with hands that had steadied through countless emergencies. In the background, 200 Catharan voices continued their songs of life and protection, creating a symphony of love that transcended species boundaries. The moment of truth was approaching. Sarah held the first syringe up to the light, watching the pale blue serum catch the medical bay's sterile illumination. The hybrid antibody solution represented hours of precise molecular engineering, combining the best of human immunology with Catharan biological memory. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Who receives the first dose? She asked, looking around at the 17 unconscious cubs. Without hesitation, Vextar pointed to the smallest patient. Nexori. He fades fastest. If your medicine can save him, it can save them all. The tiny white-furred cub lay motionless, his breathing so shallow it was barely detectable. Sarah knelt beside him and carefully inserted the IV line she had prepared. Around them, the pack songs continued, creating an atmosphere of protection and hope. The injection itself will only take seconds, Sarah explained to the gathered parents, but the antibodies need time to circulate and engage with his immune system. We should see initial responses within an hour if it's going to work. She slowly depressed the syringe plunger, watching the engineered serum flow into the cub's bloodstream. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Nexori's small body shuddered, and his breathing deepened slightly. His heart rate is increasing, Mixandra reported from her monitoring station. Brain activity is showing improvement. A murmur of hope rippled through the assembled Kitharans. Sarah quickly moved to prepare the next injection, this time for Zira. As she worked, she explained what they should expect. The antibodies will target the virus aggressively. The cubs might experience temporary discomfort as their immune systems activate. Some may develop mild fevers initially. That's normal and actually a good sign. It means their bodies are learning to fight. Zira received her injection with barely a whimper, her golden fur damp with perspiration. Her father never stopped singing, his deep voice weaving through the complex harmonies of the pack songs. Sarah had read about Kitharan music theory, but hearing it performed live was extraordinary. Each voice supported the others, creating layers of sound that seemed to resonate at frequencies specifically comforting to their young. "Doctor," one of the pack mothers called softly. Nexori's eyes are moving. Sarah rushed back to the smallest cub. His eyelids were indeed fluttering, and color was returning to his small nose and ear tips. More importantly, her scanner showed his immune system beginning to recognize and attack the viral infection. "It's working," she breathed, hardly daring to believe it. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of injections and monitoring. Sarah administered the hybrid serum to all 17 cubs, carefully adjusting dosages based on body weight and symptom severity. The pack never stopped singing, rotating voices so that the protective songs continued without break. By the 6th hour, the transformation was undeniable. Cubs who had been comatose were opening their eyes, responding to their parents' voices and showing interest in water. Fever patterns were changing from the dangerous inflammation of viral infection to the productive heat of immune system activation. "Zira is trying to sit up," Vextar announced, wonder filling his voice. Sarah looked over to see the small golden cub struggling to raise her head. Her fever had broken and her eyes were clear and alert for the first time in weeks. When she saw her father's face, she made a small chirping sound that brought tears to every adult Kitharan present. "Papa?" Zira's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried clearly in the hushed medical bay. "I am here, little star," Vextar replied, gathering his daughter carefully into his arms. "You are safe now." Similar scenes were playing out across the medical bay as other cubs began awakening. The pack songs shifted from protective lullabies to celebration melodies, joy replacing the desperate hope that had sustained them through the night. But Sarah's medical training kept her cautious. "This is excellent progress, but we're not finished yet. The antibodies need another 12 hours to fully clear the infection. The cubs need rest, fluids, and continued monitoring." "What do they need for food?" asked one of the mothers, a sleek, dark-furred female whose twin sons were both showing improvement. "Start with clear broths and simple nutrients," Sarah advised. "Their digestive systems have been stressed by the illness. Gradual reintroduction of normal foods over the next few days." Mixandra approached with updated readings from her instruments. "The pathogen levels are dropping rapidly in all patients. Your hybrid treatment is exceeding our most optimistic projections." Sarah allowed herself a moment of relief, but her scientific mind was already analyzing what had made this intervention successful. The combination of targeted antibodies and pack bonding had created a synergistic effect neither approach could have achieved alone. "There's something important we need to discuss," she said, addressing the assembled Kitharans. "This pathogen is likely to remain in the general refugee population. Other Kitharan children could be exposed as more families arrive. We need to establish a vaccination protocol." Vextar looked up from where he was feeding Zira small sips of electrolyte solution. "You can make medicine to prevent this sickness?" "Using the same principles, yes. A weakened version of the pathogen combined with adult antibodies should provide protection for cubs whose immune systems haven't fully developed yet." The implications were enormous. Word of the outbreak had already spread through refugee networks. Thousands of Kitharan families were fleeing the war zones, and their children would be just as vulnerable as these 17 cubs had been. "How many doses can your fabrication unit produce?" Mixandra asked. Sarah ran quick calculations on her portable computer. "With the resources available on this station, maybe 50 doses per day. But if we can get authorization to replicate the process on other medical facilities..." "I will speak with the Refugee Council immediately," Vextar declared. What you have done here must be shared with every family fleeing the Dominion territories. As if responding to their conversation, Nexori stirred in his mother's arms and looked directly at Sarah with bright, intelligent eyes. He made a small sound, almost like a purr, and reached one tiny paw toward her. "He knows you saved him," his mother whispered. "Kitharan cubs remember those who protect them during their most vulnerable time. You will always be part of his pack now." Sarah gently touched the cub's small paw with her finger, feeling the remarkable softness of his fur and the strength returning to his small body. The trust in his eyes was absolute and humbling. Around them, the medical bay had transformed from a place of desperation into one of hope and healing. Cubs were sitting up, playing with simple toys their parents had brought, and even attempting their first small pack songs. The sound of healthy young voices joining the adult harmonies was the most beautiful music Sarah had ever heard. But even as she celebrated this victory, her mind was already moving toward the next challenge, scaling up production and distribution of the vaccine to protect thousands of other vulnerable children across the refugee camps. 3 days after the breakthrough, Sarah found herself standing before the Emergency Council of the Refugee Protection Alliance, a hastily assembled group of representatives from 12 different species. The council chamber was a converted conference room on Sanctuary Station, its walls lined with translation matrices to accommodate the various communication methods of its diverse membership. "Dr. Chen," spoke Counselor Vexazan, a crystalline being whose voice resonated like wind chimes, "the reports we have received are unprecedented. You claim to have cured a species-specific plague using untested hybrid medicine?" Sarah activated her holographic presentation, displaying before and after scans of the Kitharan cubs. "The evidence speaks for itself, Counselor. All 17 patients recovered completely within 72 hours. More importantly, we've identified the pathogen and developed both treatment and prevention protocols." The Thaxian representative, Ambassador Korith, leaned forward on 6 spindly legs. "The implications for refugee safety are significant, but so are the risks. Cross-species medical intervention has a history of catastrophic failures, which is exactly why we need to act quickly and carefully," Sarah replied. "Intelligence reports indicate that over 30,000 Kitharan refugees are still in transit from the war zones. Without preventive measures, we could see hundreds of cubs affected by this pathogen." On the massive display screen behind her, Sarah showed projections of infection rates based on current refugee movement patterns. The numbers were sobering. Without intervention, they could lose an entire generation of young Kitharans. Vextar, who had been granted special permission to address the council, rose to his full imposing height. "Honored representatives, I speak for all Kitharan pack leaders when I say that Dr. Chen's medicine saved not just our cubs, but our future. Without intervention, my daughter Zira would have joined the ancestors 3 nights ago. The treatment has shown no adverse effects," added elder healer Mixandra, her melodic voice carrying across the chamber's translation systems. "Our traditional medicine combined with human innovation created healing we thought impossible." Counselor Dexalara, representing the Andromedan Medical Authority, raised a tentacle in question. "What resources would be required for large-scale implementation? Our medical infrastructure is already strained by refugee needs." Sarah had prepared for this question. The fabrication process requires standard medical-grade equipment available on most refugee stations. The primary limitation is the need for adult Kitharan blood donations to provide the base antibodies. Each donation can produce approximately 10 treatment doses or 20 preventive vaccines. "And the human component?" asked the crystalline counselor. "Your species' contribution to this hybrid therapy?" "Immunoglobulin proteins that enhance cross-species compatibility," Sarah explained. "I'm already working with human medical services to establish donation protocols. The process is similar to standard plasma donation, but requires special handling to maintain protein stability." The council members conferred among themselves in their various languages, their translation matrices creating a brief cacophony of clicks, whistles, and harmonic tones. Sarah waited, knowing that the fate of thousands of Kitharan children hung in the balance of their decision. Ambassador Korith spoke first. "The Thaxian colonies have 3 medical fabrication facilities that could be converted to produce your hybrid serum. We pledge these resources to the effort. The Andromedan Authority will provide transport and distribution networks," added Counselor Dexlara. Our courier ships can carry temperature-stable vaccines to refugee fleets throughout this sector. One by one, the other council members committed resources in support. Within an hour, Sarah had authorization to establish production facilities on 7 different stations, with supply lines reaching deep into refugee territories. "There is one condition," stated Councillor Vexazon as the meeting concluded. "You will lead the medical implementation personally, Dr. Chen. Your expertise cannot be replicated by others at this critical time." Sarah nodded, though her heart sank at the implications. She had been away from Earth for 6 months already, and this new responsibility would extend her deployment indefinitely. But looking at Vextar and thinking of all the cubs like Zira who needed protection, the choice was clear. "I accept," she said simply. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Sarah traveled between refugee stations, training medical teams in the hybrid therapy protocols and establishing quality control standards for vaccine production. Each facility faced unique challenges, resource limitations, equipment incompatibilities, and the constant pressure of incoming refugee ships. At Horizon Station, she worked with a mixed team of human and Catherian medics to treat their first group of infected cubs. The outbreak there had been caught early, thanks to advance warning from Sanctuary Station, and all 12 patients responded well to treatment. "The pack songs make such a difference," noted Dr. Williams, a human pediatric specialist who had joined Sarah's team. "I've never seen anything like the biochemical response these children show to their families' voices. It's taught me to rethink everything about healing," Sarah replied, watching a small group of recovered cubs playing under their parents' watchful eyes. "We've been so focused on the pathogen that we sometimes forget about the patient." On Meridian Base, she encountered her first major challenge. A group of Catherian refugees had arrived after a particularly harrowing escape, their cubs showing severe malnutrition in addition to the viral infection. The standard treatment protocol needed modification to account for their weakened state. "We'll need to add nutritional support therapy," Sarah explained to the station's chief medical officer, a competent Vulcarian named Zeltek. "Their immune systems can't respond properly without adequate protein synthesis." The modified treatment worked, but it took longer and required more intensive care. Sarah added these variations to her growing treatment database, creating protocols for different refugee conditions and circumstances. The breakthrough came during her 3rd week of implementation. A message reached her from the Deep Space Monitoring Station at Kepler's Gate. Catherian fleet admirals were requesting permission to establish permanent vaccination centers on their own ships. "They want to take over production?" Sarah asked during the subspace communication with Fleet Admiral Thexara, a distinguished Catherian with ceremonial scars marking her military rank. "Not take over, Dr. Chen. Partner with. You have given us the tools to protect our young. Now we wish to ensure every Catherian child receives this protection before they reach refugee camps." The implications were staggering. Instead of treating the disease reactively, they could prevent it entirely by vaccinating cubs while still aboard family ships. It would require training Catherian medics in the hybrid therapy techniques, but it could eliminate the threat completely. "What would you need from us?" Sarah asked. "Technical training, initial equipment, and your continued guidance. Our ship healers are skilled, but this medicine requires knowledge they do not possess." Within days, Sarah found herself aboard the Catherian flagship Starfang, working with their most experienced medical staff. The ship's healing bay was a marvel of biological engineering, using living organisms to synthesize medicines and natural harmonics to promote recovery. "Your people's approach to medicine is remarkable," she told ship healer Nixendra as they calibrated the fabrication unit for shipboard use. "The integration of emotional and physical healing creates synergies we're only beginning to understand. And your methods show us that healing can cross the boundaries between peoples," the Catherian replied. "Perhaps when this war ends, our species can continue learning from each other." As Sarah watched Catherian medics successfully produce their first batch of vaccines, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. What had started as an emergency response to save 17 cubs had evolved into a collaborative effort that would protect thousands of children. Across refugee space, the pack leaders' cubs were not just surviving, they were thriving, and their salvation had created something larger than any single medical intervention. It had built bridges between species and demonstrated that cooperation could overcome challenges no one could face alone. 6 months after the first outbreak, Sarah stood in the observation deck of the medical research vessel Harmony, watching a scene that would have been impossible to imagine during those desperate first hours on Sanctuary Station. Below her, in the ship's central garden, dozens of Catharan cubs played together while their parents worked alongside human, Thaxian, and Andromedan researchers. The hybrid therapy program had exceeded every projection. Not only had they eliminated the plague from refugee populations, but the collaborative research had led to breakthroughs in cross-species immunity that benefited all member species of the Alliance. Dr. Chen, we're ready for the presentation, called Dr. Martinez, her research partner and one of the leading experts in xenoimmunology. The Galactic Health Council representatives have been waiting to see our latest findings. Sarah took one last look at the playing cubs. Among them was Zira, now healthy and energetic, chasing a floating ball with 3 other children. Her golden fur gleamed in the artificial sunlight, and her laughter created musical notes that harmonized perfectly with her playmates' joyful sounds. The presentation chamber was packed with representatives from 30 different worlds. Word of the human-Kitharan medical collaboration had spread throughout civilized space, attracting attention from species that had never before considered cooperative research. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings, Sarah began activating the holographic display. What started as an emergency response has become something much larger. We've discovered that biological diversity isn't just strength in evolution, it's strength in medicine. The display showed complex molecular diagrams illustrating how different species' immune systems could complement each other. Human adaptability combined with Catharan biological memory, enhanced by Thaxian precision engineering and Andromedan distribution networks, had created treatments that no single species could have developed alone. The applications extend far beyond the original pathogen, Dr. Martinez added. We've successfully treated 17 different conditions using hybrid therapy protocols. Cancer analog diseases in 3 species, autoimmune disorders in 5, and even age-related degeneration in 2. Representative Keltar from the Centauri Federation raised a crystalline appendage. What are the limitations? Surely not every medical condition can be addressed through cross-species treatment. You're absolutely right, Sarah acknowledged. The technique works best for conditions where one species has natural resistance that can be transferred to another. It requires extensive biological compatibility testing and often months of development time. But the potential is extraordinary, interjected Fleet Admiral Thexera, who had joined the presentation via subspace link from the Kitharan home fleet. Our ship healers have identified 12 other human resistance traits that could benefit our people. And we've shared knowledge of our rapid healing factors with human researchers. The implications were staggering. Instead of each species struggling with their own unique medical challenges, they could share their evolutionary strengths to benefit everyone. There's something else, Sarah said, advancing to her final slide. The cubs who recovered from the original outbreak have shown remarkable immunity development. Their exposure to hybrid therapy appears to have enhanced their natural adaptive immune responses. She displayed long-term health data from the 17 original patients. All were thriving, but more importantly, they were showing resistance to other pathogens that typically affected young Catharans. Their immune systems had been essentially trained to recognize and adapt to new threats more effectively. In essence, we may have created a generation of Catharan children with enhanced immunological capabilities, Dr. Martinez explained. The implications for refugee health and long-term species survival are profound. Bexitar's voice came through the communication system from Sanctuary Station, where he now served as liaison between Catharan refugees and Alliance Medical Services. My daughter Zira has not been sick a single day since her treatment. None of the cubs have. They are stronger than any generation before them. After the presentation, Sarah found herself surrounded by researchers eager to establish similar collaborative programs. The Vulcarian Medical Institute wanted to explore human pain tolerance mechanisms. The Regelian Health Authority was interested in Kitharan regenerative abilities. The possibilities seemed endless, but what struck her most was the change in attitudes. Species that had previously viewed medical knowledge as proprietary secrets were now openly sharing their most advanced research. The success of the hybrid therapy had demonstrated that cooperation produced better results than competition. Dr. Chen approached elder healer Mixandra, who had traveled from the Kitharan fleet specifically for this gathering. I bring word from the High Council of Healers. They wish to establish a permanent joint research facility, staffed by healers from both our peoples. That's incredible, Sarah replied. Where would they want to build it? Actually, they propose something unprecedented. A medical research station at the border between human and Kytheran space, open to all Alliance species. A place where the best minds can work together without the constraints of individual world politics. The idea was revolutionary. Medical research had always been conducted within species boundaries, limited by the assumption that biological differences made cooperation impossible. The hybrid therapy had shattered that assumption completely. Later that evening, Sarah video called her supervisor on Earth. Dr. Patricia Reynolds, head of the Terrestrial Medical Authority, appeared on her screen looking exhausted but excited. Sarah, the applications for your hybrid therapy protocols are pouring in from every medical facility in human space. We're looking at the biggest revolution in medicine since the discovery of antibiotics. It feels surreal, Sarah admitted. 6 months ago, I was just trying to save 17 sick children. Now we're talking about reshaping medical practice across multiple species. That's how the best breakthroughs happen, Dr. Reynolds replied. Someone faces an impossible problem and refuses to accept that it's impossible. Your willingness to think beyond conventional boundaries saved those cubs and opened doors we didn't even know existed. As the call ended, Sarah returned to the observation deck. The garden below was quieter now, with cubs napping in their parents' arms while adults continued their research discussions. The scene embodied everything the hybrid therapy program had accomplished. Different species working together, children thriving in safety and hope for a healthier future. Zira appeared at the deck's entrance, having somehow escaped her father's supervision. She scrambled up onto the bench beside Sarah and curled up against her arm, purring contentedly. Papa says you're going to the new healing station, Zira said in her developing standard speech. Will you still be our pack doctor? Sarah smiled, stroking the cub's golden fur. Always, little star. Distance doesn't change pack bonds. Good, Zira replied, closing her eyes. The pack needs you. Looking out at the stars beyond the viewport, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. The refugee crisis continued. The war still raged in distant sectors and countless medical challenges remained unsolved. But now they faced these problems together, sharing strength and wisdom across species boundaries. The pack leader's cubs were no longer dying. They were growing strong, learning, playing, and helping to build a future where cooperation replaced isolation. And in their laughter and health lay the promise of something greater than any single species could achieve alone. 2 years had passed since the medical breakthrough, and Sarah found herself walking through the corridors of Unity Station, the galaxy's first truly interspecies medical research facility. The station hung in neutral space between human and Kytheran territories, its bio-adaptive architecture incorporating design elements from 12 different civilizations. The walls themselves were living entities, Kytheran bioengineering that responded to the emotional states of passing beings by adjusting lighting and temperature for optimal comfort. Human efficiency merged with alien aesthetics created spaces that felt both familiar and wonderfully strange. Dr. Chen to Lab 7, her communicator chimed. Priority message from the Outer Rim. Sarah quickened her pace, her stomach tightening with familiar worry. The Outer Rim territories were the latest refugee destination, where displaced populations from the ongoing Dominion War had established temporary settlements. If there was a priority medical message from that region, it likely meant another outbreak. Lab 7 was bustling with activity when she arrived. Dr. Martinez was coordinating with research teams on 3 different worlds, while Mixandra consulted with Kytheran ship healers via holographic projection. The controlled chaos reminded Sarah of those first desperate hours on Sanctuary Station. But now it was backed by 2 years of experience and refined protocols. What's the situation? Sarah asked, approaching the central display. New pathogen completely unknown, Martinez replied grimly. It's affecting multiple species this time. Humans, Kytherans, and Thaxians all showing symptoms. The refugees on Kepler's Edge are reporting 1,500 cases across 7 different settlements. Sarah's blood ran cold. A multi-species pathogen was exponentially more dangerous than anything they had previously encountered. The complexity of developing treatments that would work across different biologies could take months, time the sick refugees didn't have. Symptoms? She asked, pulling up the incoming medical data. Respiratory distress, neurological inflammation, and immune system collapse, Mixandra reported. Similar presentation across all affected species, but the progression rates vary significantly. Humans appear to have the fastest decline. Sarah studied the data streams from the Outer Rim medical facilities. The pathogen was aggressive and well adapted, suggesting it might be an engineered bioweapon rather than a natural disease. The thought made her stomach churn. Using disease as a weapon against refugees was a war crime of the highest order. Have we confirmed transmission patterns? She asked. Airborne, highly contagious, with a 12-hour incubation period, Martinez answered. The good news is that it doesn't appear to affect children under 10 in any species. The bad news is that it's spreading faster than containment efforts can keep up. Sarah felt a grim sense of familiarity. Another crisis, another race against time. Another group of desperate people depending on medical intervention to save their lives. But this time she wasn't facing it alone. Initiate Emergency Protocol 7, she announced. Contact every research facility in the Alliance network. We need samples, genetic analyses, and immune system profiles from all affected species, and get me a direct line to the Refugee Medical Command. Within hours, Unity Station had transformed into a crisis coordination center. Researchers from dozens of worlds were connected via quantum communication, sharing data in real time as they worked to understand the new pathogen. The collaboration that had begun with Kitharan Cubs was now a galaxy-spanning network of scientific cooperation. I'm seeing something unusual, called Dr. Zelthara, a Volcarian immunologist who had joined the station's permanent staff. The pathogen appears to have multiple targeting mechanisms, as if it was designed to affect different species simultaneously. Sarah moved to examine Zelthara's findings. The molecular structure was unlike anything in their pathogen databases. Too complex to be natural, too sophisticated to be a simple mutation. This is definitely engineered, she concluded. Someone created this specifically to target Alliance species. The implications were staggering. If hostile forces were deploying bioweapons against refugee populations, the entire humanitarian effort was under threat. Millions of displaced beings could become targets in a war that was supposed to be fought between military forces. Dr. Chen. Vextar's voice came through the communication system. He was currently aboard a medical transport heading toward the Outer Rim. I bring word from the refugee settlements. The sick are asking specifically for human medics. They remember how you saved the cubs. They believe human medicine can save them again. The weight of expectation settled on Sarah's shoulders like a familiar burden. She had become a symbol of hope to refugee populations across known space, but symbols couldn't cure diseases that killed healthy adults in less than 48 hours. We'll find a solution, she promised, hoping her voice sounded more confident than she felt. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Kenji Nakamura, a human geneticist working on the station's theoretical biology team, had been analyzing the pathogen's structure when he noticed something peculiar. Dr. Chen, you need to see this, he called from his workstation. The pathogen has recognition sequences that match historical bioweapon research from the Dominion archives. But there's something else. It appears to have been specifically designed to be vulnerable to hybrid immunity. Sarah rushed to examine his data. The pathogen's genetic structure contained what appeared to be deliberate weaknesses, molecular gaps that could be exploited by the same type of cross-species antibodies they had developed for the Kitharan cubs. It's like someone created a bioweapon that was meant to be defeated, Nakamura explained, but only by beings who understood interspecies medical cooperation. The pieces fell into place with chilling clarity. Someone within the Dominion military had engineered this pathogen not to win a war, but to demonstrate the value of the Alliance's medical cooperation. It was a test, a challenge designed to prove whether different species could truly work together when facing an existential threat. If that's true, Sarah said slowly, then we already have most of the tools we need to defeat it. The hybrid therapy protocols, the cross-species antibody production, the collaborative research network. It was all preparation for exactly this type of challenge. Within 6 hours, teams across the Alliance were producing experimental treatments based on the hybrid therapy model. Human immune factors were combined with Kitharan biological, memory and Thaxian synthesis precision to create antibodies that could target the pathogen's deliberately engineered vulnerabilities. The first treatment batches are Ready, reported Dr. Williams, who was coordinating production from Sanctuary Station. We're sending them to Kepler's Edge immediately. As Sarah watched the quantum communication displays showing treatment shipments racing toward the outer rim, she realized that the original 17 cubs had been more than patients. They had been the foundation for a medical revolution that was now saving thousands of lives across multiple species. Dr. Chen, Mixandra approached with the latest reports from the outbreak zone. The treatments are working. Mortality rates are dropping dramatically, and new infections are responding to prevention protocols. Sarah allowed herself a moment of relief, but her mind was already moving toward larger implications. If the pathogen had indeed been engineered as a test, then other challenges would likely follow. The Alliance's medical cooperation network would need to be ready for anything. We need to expand the program, she announced to the assembled research teams. Not just treatment protocols, but pre-positioned resources, rapid response capabilities, and cross-training for medical personnel from every member species. The war was changing, evolving beyond traditional military engagements into tests of cooperation and adaptability. But as Sarah looked around at the diverse group of beings working together to save lives, she felt confident they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. 5 years after that first desperate night on Sanctuary Station, Sarah stood before the Galactic Assembly, the most prestigious gathering of civilized species in known space. The great chamber housed representatives from over 200 worlds, their varied forms creating a tapestry of intelligence and diversity that never failed to inspire her. Behind her, a massive display showed the current status of the Interspecies Medical Alliance, 43 research stations, 217 collaborative facilities, and over 50,000 medical personnel trained in cross-species treatment protocols. The network that had begun with 17 dying cubs now protected billions of beings across the galaxy. Honored delegates, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation matrices. 5 years ago, we faced a simple problem. Sick children who were dying because their biology didn't match our medicine. Today, that problem has taught us that diversity isn't weakness to be overcome, but strength to be shared. In the VIP gallery, she could see familiar faces. Vextar sat with his family, including Zira, now a healthy 10-year-old who served as an ambassador for young refugees across known space. Mixandra represented the Kitharan Healer Council, while Dr. Martinez had been promoted to head the Alliance Medical Authority. The statistics tell part of the story, Sarah continued, advancing her presentation to show survival rates and treatment success data. Plague outbreaks that once killed thousands now affect dozens. Genetic diseases that plagued entire species for millennia have been eliminated through shared immunological resources. Average life expectancy has increased by 15% across all member species. A ripple of approval moved through the assembled delegates. The numbers were impressive, but Sarah knew the real story lay deeper than statistics. But the true measure of our success isn't in data. It's in the children who are alive today because we chose cooperation over isolation. It's in the parents who no longer fear plague ships arriving at refugee stations. It's in the researchers who have learned that the universe's biological diversity is its greatest treasure. The presentation shifted to show images from across Alliance space, multi-species medical teams working together, children from dozens of different worlds playing safely in refugee centers, and research facilities where the impossible had become routine. The Dominion War tested us in ways we never expected, Sarah acknowledged. They used bioweapons not just to kill, but to challenge our commitment to cooperation. Every engineered pathogen was a question. Would we abandon our principles when the stakes became personal? Would we retreat into species isolationism when cooperation became difficult? She paused, looking directly at the camera that was broadcasting this session across the galaxy. The answer was always no. When faced with engineered plagues designed to defeat single-species medicine, we responded with multi-species solutions. When they targeted our diversity, we made it our greatest strength. The final portion of her presentation revealed classified information that had been declassified specifically for this address. Intelligence reports showing that the Dominion's bioweapon program had been abandoned 18 months ago, deemed ineffective against Alliance cooperation protocols. The enemy's greatest weapons became the foundation for our greatest achievements, Sarah explained. Every pathogen they created taught us more about cross-species immunity. Every attack made our medical network stronger and more responsive. As she spoke, Sarah caught sight of a particular figure in the delegation gallery. Admiral Thexera's young son, Kexran, who had been among the second group of cubs treated with hybrid therapy. Now 16, he was studying at Unity Station to become the first generation of naturally interspecies trained healers. Today, I stand before you not as a human doctor, but as a member of a medical community that transcends species boundaries. Our children grow up learning that biological diversity is strength, that cooperation saves lives, and that the universe is large enough for all of us to thrive together. The applause that followed was extraordinary, not just polite diplomatic recognition, but genuine enthusiasm from beings who had seen their worst fears transformed into their greatest hopes. After the formal session, Sarah found herself surrounded by young people from dozens of species. They were students, researchers, and aspiring medics who had grown up during the Alliance's medical revolution. To them, cross-species cooperation wasn't revolutionary. It was simply how medicine worked. Dr. Chen asked a young Andromedan studying xenobiology, "Our professors say you originally thought the hybrid therapy might not work. How did you convince yourself to try something so risky?" Sarah smiled, thinking back to that desperate night when 17 cubs lay dying and conventional medicine offered no hope. Sometimes the choice isn't between safe and risky. It's between trying something unprecedented and watching people die. When you're faced with that choice, innovation stops being risky and becomes necessary. "But how did you know the different biologies would be compatible?" pressed a human student specializing in Kitharan physiology. "I didn't know," Sarah replied honestly. "But I had something more important than certainty. I had parents who were willing to risk everything for their children, and colleagues who were willing to trust a crazy idea because conventional approaches weren't working." Later that evening, Sarah attended a private reception hosted by the Kitharan delegation. The gathering was held in a bioadaptive garden that recreated the atmosphere of the Kitharan homeworld, complete with the musical harmonics that promoted healing and well-being. "Pack-sister," Bextar approached, using the Kitharan term of deepest familial respect. "There are no words in any language sufficient to thank you for what you have given us." "You gave me just as much," Sarah replied. "The courage to think beyond conventional boundaries, the trust to try unprecedented treatments, and the wisdom to understand that healing requires more than medicine." Zira bounded over, now tall enough to reach Sarah's shoulder. Her golden fur had the subtle iridescence that marked healthy young Kitharans, and her eyes sparkled with intelligence and mischief. "Aunt Sarah, I've been accepted to the Medical Academy on Unity Station," she announced proudly. "I want to become a healer like you and Mixandra." "Like us, but better," Sarah corrected. "Your generation doesn't have to overcome the prejudices that kept species apart. You can focus all your energy on discovery and healing." As the evening continued, Sarah found herself in conversation with medical professionals from across the Alliance. They shared stories of breakthrough treatments, collaborative discoveries, and lives saved through the protocols she had helped establish. Each story reinforced the same message: cooperation produced results that individual effort could never achieve. Near midnight, as the reception wound down, Sarah stepped onto the station's observation deck. The stars beyond the viewport held a different meaning now than they had 5 years ago. Instead of distant points of light marking alien territories, they represented friends, colleagues, and patients whose lives were interconnected by bonds stronger than species differences. Her communicator chimed softly with an incoming message from Earth. Dr. Reynolds appeared on the small screen, her face showing the fatigue that came with managing the busiest medical authority in human space. "Sarah, I wanted you to see this before the public announcement tomorrow," Reynolds said, transmitting a data file. "The World Health Council has voted unanimously to establish the Chen Protocol as the standard approach for all interspecies medical cooperation. Your hybrid therapy methodology will be taught in every medical school in human space." Sarah stared at the screen, overwhelmed by the implications. The desperate improvisation that had saved 17 cubs was now becoming the foundation for medical education across her entire species. "There's something else," Reynolds continued. "We've received formal requests from 43 different species asking for human medical exchange students. They want to learn our approaches to adaptive treatment and they want to teach us their specialized knowledge in return. As the communication ended, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had rolled up her sleeves and gone into that medical bay planning to save some sick children. She was emerging from this experience having helped reshape the relationship between species throughout the galaxy. The pack leader's cubs were no longer dying. They were thriving, learning, growing, and preparing to heal a universe that had finally learned to see diversity as strength. And in their laughter, their curiosity, and their boundless potential, Sarah could see the future of galactic civilization, cooperative, compassionate, and forever united by the simple truth that life was precious, regardless of what form it took. In the end, rolling up her sleeves and going in had been about more than medicine. It had been about choosing hope over fear, connection over isolation, and the courage to believe that different could mean better, not dangerous. The stars continued their eternal dance beyond the viewport, but now they danced together,